The project aims to provoke the status quo of epistemological elitism and incomplete ontological frameworks of knowledge that pervade the factory model schools of the West. These characteristics privilege dominant viewpoints and deny access to the podium of visibility to many. Who decides what knowledge matters? I would argue that we all should. Pedagogy is a crucial component of the democratic process. The social and intellectual frameworks we encounter in school are the initial formative structures through which we understand ourselves and negotiate our relationship to a group and later to notions of citizenship and the participatory processes of society. Education is both a strategy for acquiring knowledge and a framework that provides an opportunity for the qualification of expressed knowledge. The project addresses both of these aspects through a mixed reality archive for individualized qualifications, personal experiences, and intellectual exchanges within a community. These interactions and environments are recorded in a relational database that structurally challenges the strict categorization of knowledge into discrete containers of ever-increasing contextual severance. Instead, it allows the connections made through the flow of knowledge between agents to become a functional tool for navigating the dense, semiotic material networks we are everyday agents of. These qualifications are written to a blockchain, which expresses in its structural form the model of decentralized authorship and validation. The defiance of centralized and authoritative authorship in academic discourse, providing spaces for the production of individualized qualifications, and an individual's right to their immutable record must be the pillars on which future education must rest. The project began by conducting a set of qualitative interviews to understand the gathering of a PhD defense, and the project grew to address the entirety of this scholarly journey. Paper Trails is a speculation on what that might look like. The factory model schools were created during the Industrial Revolution in America. They seek standardization, efficiency, and classification above all else. The extraction of predetermined knowledge through an elaborate system of containers and gates allows for the ease of human categorization for pre-existing roles in society. As education moves into virtual realms, we must fundamentally challenge the structure of its functionality in society that came into being when schools were still segregated and colonial powers sought to alienate individuals from themselves as a means of control and exploitation. The Dewey Decimal System is the most common mode of classification in libraries around the world, and is perhaps the clearest example of how dominant interpretations are passed down through generations through the strict categorization of content into a single subject area. In 1932, topics relating to homosexuality were first added to the system under mental derangements. In 1989, it was added to social problems, a classification that continues in the current edition. Knowledge is the most democratic source of power, and I would add that the formal qualification of the knowledge that any individual can express gives them the power to functionally interface with the participatory systems of society. Providing a space for users to generate their own portfolio of qualifications is crucial in providing a signal to those outside the immediate context of the individual that they are capable of participation. Multiple intelligence theory proposes that people are not born with all the intelligence that they will ever have, and challenge the notion that there is one single type of intelligence. Howard Gardner introduced 8 different types of intelligence and notes that linguistic and logical mathematical modalities are most valued in school and society. Providing students a space to record new forms of self-authorship will foster broader participation and self-discovery. The immutability of these qualifications and interactions is made possible through a blockchain. A blockchain is a growing list of records called blocks that are linked using a cryptographic hash for the previous block, transactional data, and a timestamp. By design, a blockchain is resistant to modification of its data. These certificates, these unique pieces of physical paper, an official transcript and an official diploma, signify the qualification and incorporation of an individual into an institution. They only function as a marker of institutional ownership of the individual's record. To transition immutable qualifications to a blockchain shifts ownership from a central authority to the individual who is protected by a decentralized authentication network. The seemingly simple act might radically change the way individuals negotiate a relationship to their intellectual ecosystem. Paper Trails as a virtual environment takes on the physical characteristics of paper. It does so as a metaphor for the environment being the blank sheet on which the users will write their qualifications, where each block in the blockchain is represented by a piece of paper in the world. This lets the environment display the proliferating lines of interactions on the communal ledger. The elimination of accountability only benefits those who seek to oppress through opaque practices. The project refocuses virtual interactions on accountability and aims to explore the interplay between weight and weightlessness of paper in the world. At the highest levels of academia, the notions of indeterminate world building, the relationality of disciplines, and the expectation of comprehensive individual investigation under trusted advisors takes place.
The PhD process, at least in the social behavioral sciences, you take lots and lots of coursework and then you do research. And the coursework and whatever your graduate assistantships are supposed to prepare you to get ready to do this thing where you're contributing some original novel piece of scholarship to your field. The professor kind of took a special interest in me, and he said, you really should think about graduate school. Second part really had to do with, so you jump through a bunch of hoops, and even though they might not be designed to scare the bejabbers out of you, they typically do.
I had huge moments of doubt constantly. For instance, before my qualifying exam, I actually just wanted to leave. You're really just grilled for like 3 hours in a private session with your committee, and they do on purpose grill you to the point that you don't know the answer.
So there's a set of qualifying exams. In my case, it was about 40 hours where you'd be locked in a room every day. It was an ordeal. It was a physical ordeal on top of everything else. I was married. We sort of kept it together, body and soul. Being a graduate student, you didn't expect it was going to be quite this bleak.
I didn't have my first publication for a long time. And there were years where I didn't have like a finished product to show for myself. And that really gets to you mentally because you're just going in alone for long periods of time with like very uncertain outcomes.
The third element, it's recognized by this larger community of scholars, and they either accept you in that community of scholars, congratulations, Dr. Wilson, or they say, sorry, you did not cut the mustard. The rite of passage is a good label. At the end of this, you look in the mirror and go, oh my gosh, I did it. Wow, I must be competent.
I chose to do a PhD because I wanted to zoom in on a particular issue that I thought wasn't being addressed for those of us who are concerned in general with migrants' rights, or those of us who are doing work in sociology or anthropology or work that requires more ethnographic methods. You spend a year in a field. So I was in Berlin and New York, and I was writing when I could whilst also being out and recording my data. And that also took place mostly in like the Green Grape Annex, which is like on Flatbush Avenue in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, where I would sit and write for most of my writing period. My field per se did not exist. I had to synthesize a lot of different fields. I approached a supervisor who I found quite inspiring at the time. They'd introduced me to urban geography, and he just bounced ideas back and forth with me until we had a proposal. And so I took critical migration studies, and I took information society and sort of science and technology studies and artificial intelligence and big data discourse and political sociology. And I basically created ways that were sort of historically constructed in which tech had mattered to things like poverty and inequality and a state's sense of control over its population or over others. And I kind of traced how these different narratives and these different studies were really like linked to each other.
Regalia and artifacts play a central role in long-standing academic traditions. At a graduation ceremony, each aspect of the garb has a symbolic meaning that speaks to institutional structures. Shapes, colors, artifacts worn and held by individuals at graduation ceremonies indicate institutional associations, the discipline of study, the level of qualification, and administrative positions within the institution. In Paper Trails, avatar skins will reflect the participation of individuals instead of signaling institutional allegiances. They are generated from content and ideas that an individual is currently interacting with. While conversing, a content block can be copied onto the avatar skin of another. This works to show the spread of ideas between individuals. Over time, avatar skins grow more elaborate and detailed, as a lifetime's worth of interactions becomes a virtual facade into the mind of another. In the marketplace for social and intellectual capital, users can place their qualifications and content into the community discourse by placing them on relevant concept trees. The power of the trees is in the forest, and the hyperlinking root system lying beneath that reveals the relational relevance to other content and qualifications that span across space, time, and disciplinary categorization. These relational connections are made through automatic linking of metadata and through tending by the community that seeks to create an ever-expanding network of content that expresses the breadth of human knowledge and celebrates the addition of new ontologies and epistemologies. This then allows the user's contribution to be placed within the discourse and accrue influence over time if it becomes a foundational root to other ideas. A PhD defense typically takes place in a classroom. This venue works to accommodate others who may want to witness the defense and is a signifier that the student has become the teacher. The panel of evaluators is chosen by the candidate based on their subject matter expertise. They will be the most well-equipped to evaluate the candidate's methodology in producing a novel piece of scholarship within the discipline. In paper trails, similar moments of comprehensive qualification can take place in the room of incorporation. In this banal space, every block that the user has contributed to the system is called up on their avatar skin. At the moment of evaluation, the content blocks disassociate from the avatar. This same process will happen for the evaluators as the blocks expand to create a landscape. At the moment of incorporation, the block containing this interaction is written to every avatar present as a permanent block. This powerful moment, written onto the souls of everyone involved in this process, will now be written into the community ledger to be shared and visited throughout time. And this moment will now be present each day as we look into the virtual mirror and see not just ourselves, but also the connections we make to others in the crafting of our experience.